This is Encounter Jesus Television. Experience intimacy, transformation, and dominion.
Hello, and welcome to Encounter Jesus Television International. My name is Reward and Orokpo. I'm the Director of Productions, Encounter Jesus Ministries International. And today we will be having a very important conversation. In a few hours from now, the Nigerian public will be going to the presidential polls to elect their next president for the next 4 years, possibly the next 8 years. This is a very critical and important juncture in the life of our great nations. As believers, the scripture says that government shall be upon our shoulders. Politics is not just one of those things. It is our responsibility to ensure that government is done properly. So today, to carry on this conversation, is a friend and a brother with a very rich history of political pedigree. He is also a nationalist, a poet, a writer, and an activist. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me a friend and a brother, Sir D.K. Chukwumerije. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Reward. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. So, first question I'd like to ask. There's a huge Japa movement happening in Nigeria. People are leaving in droves out of the country. Intelligentsia, young people, people with ideas and capacity are leaving. And you chose this time to dig in further and get more active in the political space, in activism, to ensure that people become more socially and politically aware of how to build a better nation. Why is that? Why are you doing the reverse with your skill sets and all? You should do very well overseas. Why are you still here and asking us to stay and do more?
I'm here because I believe in Nigeria. I believe Nigeria has a future. I believe Nigeria is destined to be a great nation. I believe that. And so I'm living out my faith. Secondly, I believe that it is my purpose. That's the reason why I was put on earth, that I'm called to this country, I'm called to this geophysical location. I believe that my gifting and my calling is for the African people, that the upliftment of Africa is important to the bigger picture, of what needs to happen on the global stage. So I have a sense of purpose, and I have a sense, a deep sense that this is where I'm called to. In my 20s, I went to the UK to do a master's, and I spent 4 years there and considered the idea of settling there and living there and things like that. But in all the 4 years I was there, my heart and it keeps calling you back. I don't think that life is about bread and butter. Not that these things are not important, but the greatest thing that you can live this life with is a deep sense of fulfillment, that I came and I did what I came here to do. Being able to eat, clothe yourself, drive a good car are all sort of ancillary. That's not your primary purpose of living. So what I like to tell young people is that, look, if your destiny and your purpose is in America or the UK or wherever it is, by all means go. But if it's that you're simply running away from suffering and hunger and stress, that's not a reason to jakba. The first thing to ask yourself is, what is my purpose, and where is the place where my purpose is to be fulfilled? That's the first question to ask. If you don't know the answer to that question, you're walking blind. You're just following your wherever belief is. That's not going to lead you to a fulfilled life. There's nobody that has achieved anything that is great, anything that is of eternal value, that lived their life that way. You ask, what is my purpose? And where your purpose is pointing you down, whether it looks lucrative or not, you go there. I always remember the story of Abraham and Lot looking down. And Abraham told Lot, choose. And Lot chose with his physical eyes. Oh, that place looks lucrative, I'm going to go there. But Abraham chose with the eyes of his spirit, eyes of faith, and followed his purpose. And yes, it was a very bumpy road, years in the wilderness, but at the end of the day, what comes out of a life of purpose is eternal and is of eternal value and would really make a fundamental difference in the world.
It sounds to me like you're saying young Christians should be Christians, which is essentially a selfless life. Come here to do what you were asked to come here to do, regardless of whether it's easy or hard. It is irrelevant. My Father has sent me into this world to do His will. I will do His will regardless.
Absolutely.
Why is that so different in this generation? Sometimes I talk with people, I'm like, okay, I have an opportunity. I have had several opportunities to live the country quite well without stress of getting my papers, but in each time, I just don't see it. I just don't feel like I can go and land in another city and beat my chest when I didn't give my all to the city I came from. I feel like if I'm leaving, I should, you know, come to a new land and say, I am reward. I did my best in Nigeria. I have come to do my best here, and the land should answer to me. Why is it so difficult to connect with a lot of people, and especially the younger generation? Everybody just wants to self.
Well, it may have to do with the fact that we live in a globalized society now.
Okay.
And so you have more, you're constantly comparing yourself with other people. You know, on the internet, on social media, you're constantly comparing the kind of life you're living, the kind of clothes you're wearing, the kind of food you're, you know, the level of comfort you have, the coolness. You're constantly comparing with others. And in terms of being able to live a purpose-driven life, for a while, you need to forget, it's not a competition with anybody. I'm not trying to live like anybody. I'm not trying to live at par with anybody. I'm trying to compete with myself. I'm trying to find out what is my own purpose. I'm trying to bring out the value within me, because that's the only way you can really contribute to human civilization, add something unique, rather than simply imitating, which is what we are currently as a society. We're a society that majors on imitation. You know, we copy, we consume, we imitate. We don't produce a lot of stuff that is original.
Political systems are quite copied.
Yes. And that's because people are in a hurry to catch up with their neighbor. I'm in a hurry to look like you. I'm in a hurry to drive what you're driving. And so I don't spend that time with myself to allow what is within me to come out. And these are things that in the past, it was easier, because growing up, I didn't know how the average 14-year-old in America was living. So I had that bubble around me that could really allow me to soak, you know, to settle. And many of the countries that are developed countries today, they had the advantage of developing in a time when you didn't have that competition.
The internet, it wasn't so, I
You
mean,
know,
letters were 2 weeks at the shortest, 2 or 3 months, you know,
exactly.
standardly,
You know, so Americans had the opportunity to grow at their own pace. The British had the opportunity to grow at their own pace. The Chinese had the opportunity to grow at their own pace. But I feel that we feel pressured to catch up, to have the external trappings of success as quickly as possible. And that pursuit of the external trappings of success is coming at a cost to internal, spiritual maturity.
All right, I'm going to take this in a different direction, still linked to what we just talked about. How is it possible? I follow the political landscape and hear some of the conversations done. In the West and some other countries, you hear them talking about seeding new colonies in other planets. You hear them talk about artificial intelligence. You hear them talk about, you know, new technology, self-driving cars. You hear them talk about all these things. And here, in 2023 presidential elections, some of the biggest things is I will build roads for you. I will build schools and hospitals. How did we get here? How do we become so backward that while the world is talking about incredible advancement in technology and science and philosophy and all of that, we're still talking about and boasting about the very fundamentals that we should be ashamed of? They shouldn't be part of a conversation. How did we get here?
And it goes back to the issue of consciousness, elevating our consciousness as a people. And that is a conversation that's deeper than putting you in a new set of clothes or putting you in a bigger house. So when I talked about the externals, you know, you can look like an American, you can talk like an American, but the American civilization has had time to mature internally. There is an entire ideology, an entire philosophy. People were elevating the consciousness of Americans for centuries before you started having external manifestations of prosperity. So if you go back to the 18th century, to the 17th century, you'll find Americans writing about things, about ideals and about ideas, freedom, democracy, equality, dignity. These are things that if you are talking about these things today in Nigeria, they say, I beg, now we go chop, and now we go chop. But at the time when they didn't have what they would chop. At the time when also they didn't have electricity in the 17th century, in the 18th century, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have fast cars, you know, they didn't have a healthcare system. They were just like our society is.
Yeah.
You still had people whose minds were engaged on the ideals, because you need to understand that it has to happen in your head, it has to happen in your mind before it can happen outside. It's not the other way around.
All right. So I have two questions before we go into the big question of Nigerians' political history, so we can begin to understand some of the things that are happening. One is that how, as far as this has been my perspective for a while, before the colonial days, we were fighting tribal wars. We fought them even in the colonial days. But it seems like the tribal wars have not stopped. They have moved on from battlefields of spears and shields to guns to what we have now is a more a dangerous and more deadly form of tribal war, and has moved on to political.
They really and truly had different upbringings. Their paths did not intersect much as they were growing up.
Yeah.
So they didn't go to the same schools, they didn't live on the same streets, they didn't meet in the same football fields. So they came from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
So if they had a understandable, because it's a reflection of where they were coming from. And in fact, it was because they had a real belief, an objective belief in the viability of one Nigeria. That's why in spite of their differences, they said, you know, how you ought to be, you need motivation, you need support. That is exactly what you need for a civic identity as well. You need somebody that is preaching what is a Nigerian national identity. What does it mean? What does it mean for me in my everyday life? You need to have places where you can gather and we talk about it and we encourage each other. Because we are all addicted to tribalism, even though it is killing us. And we need to consciously break that habit and learn new and positive civic values that can help our country move forward.
My guest has been has been and is DK Chukwumerije, poet, writer, conscience of the nation, and thinker. We've been talking about Nigeria, how we got here, and we're going to continue in that direction after this break.
This is
There's something called national pride. You know, it doesn't matter where you go and how successful you become where you go. One day somebody is going to ask you, where are you from originally? And when you say Nigeria, you're going to say it with a sense of shame because of what your country is. You can't escape it. Your prosperity, your success, wherever you go, you can never escape it. So I'm not against people migrating. But if you want to migrate with dignity, with pride, then you need to fix your country. You don't even have to be in your country, but you need to be part of whatever process of fixing your country. Because everybody stands on the shoulder of their country. Some people show up on the shoulder of giants. We are showing up on the shoulder of a dwarf. And that's why no matter how tall we are as individuals, we can't compete with somebody who is individually a dwarf, but is standing on the shoulder of a giant nation. So I may be a giant individually, but I can't compete with that person. So these things matter, that you didn't choose to be born in Nigeria. I didn't choose it. And if you believe in God, if truly you believe in God, then there is no random. Nothing is an accident. It means that it was His will. It is His will that you are born here, that you are born in this land. And the only reason why He sent you here is to make it better, to lift it up. So why are you running away from it? Those people in America, their forefathers understood that. And so before America was great, there was a generation that, in spite of the fact that they were living in mud, in a chaotic, in a violent environment, said, this is our land, and we will make it better. The sun will rise from here. It's a choice. A Nigerian is no less able to do that than a Chinese or a Japanese or an Indonesian or a Malaysian. It is the will of God that men are scattered all over the earth, because it is the will of God that every part of the earth should be beautiful in a unique way. They are fulfilling their own mission over there. we ought to fulfill ours over here, because there is a beauty that the African can produce that the American can't. And world civilization is lacking that beauty because you are not doing what you're supposed to do. That is the why, that I want to have pride as a Nigerian and as an African. And I know that my children and my children's children will never escape the stigma that is currently attached to the black man until Africa stands up. And Africa will not stand up until its major population centers stand up. And one of those population centers is Nigeria. It's a destiny we cannot escape.
Wow, fascinating, fascinating. So I'm going to ask about something, push that a little further. When we talk about two questions, then we get to the political history of Nigeria, the actual political history. You can enlighten us a bit how we get here. The Nigerian dream is essentially to make enough money to make government irrelevant in our lives. And it is reinforced by faith in Christ and the prosperity and the gospel, which shows that God can make you, excuse me, God can make you prosperous regardless of wherever you are. And this has got a lot of people becoming less interested in the country. We believe for supernatural prosperity and progress of our individual lives, and we have no faith or commitment to that same prosperity and progress of the nation called Nigeria. An oxymoron of sorts it is. So I'm going to ask, what would you say to Nigerians who live like this, especially those of us of faith who believe our lives can be better? God will do it for us. We will make government irrelevant in our lives. We can produce our own electricity. We can produce our own housing, our own security, by the grace of God and divine security, and the nation can languish for all we care.
That's not even the gospel. That's a perversion of the gospel. That's not the gospel of Jesus Christ. That you will go to heaven and everybody else around you will go to hell. That's a selfish, self-centered philosophy driven by narrow self-interest. It's actually demonic. The gospel of Christ is that your light will affect everybody else. That when the righteous prosper, the entire society is uplifted. That's what the gospel is. And it's not, that's what faith is about, for moving mountains. Faith is not for headache. If headache, there's Panadol. Do you understand? Your personal issues are not a problem. Faith is for intractable problems where there seems to be no solution. That's what faith is for. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And in every society that develops, you see the role that faith played in it. A nation cannot develop without faith. It is impossible. There's no nation that develops simply driven by rational thinking. The development of every nation is powered somewhere, somehow, by faith. And so Christian belief and thinking played a huge part in the upliftment of Europe, in the upliftment of America, because it takes a lot of faith to go into the unknown. It took a lot of faith in the European Dark Ages when people were focused, like I said, on their menial and basic needs, for somebody to be thinking about electricity, to be thinking about how do the stars and the planets align. Meanwhile, your neighbor is telling you that all I need is food, which makes sense.
Yeah.
It takes faith to lift up your gaze and see the bigger picture. It takes faith. It takes faith to conceive of a community of diverse human beings. It means that you have the capacity to look beyond superficial differences. Okay, even though your language is different from mine, even though some of your customs are different from mine, I believe that one God created us, therefore we are fundamentally the same. That is the basis on which community and nations are built. Without that understanding, I'll just stay with me and my kinfolk, and we'll just be little tribes all over the whole place. People that went on to build nations believed that fundamentally we are the same people. It takes faith to do that. So those that think that, oh, my faith is just to feed me and my family, that is not faith. That is a demonic principle that you're working on. God is not selfish and self-centered. Otherwise, he will have just existed by himself. But he created this entire creation so that there can be other things and other people to enjoy all of these things with us. So it always hurts me when I see people of faith, because you are the one that can build a nation. And then you leave it aside. Why don't we borrow a leaf from people like Martin Luther King in America, who allowed, look, if you really believe, you will challenge injustice. If you really believe in God, you will challenge injustice wherever you find it, because that is not the Spirit of God. And the Spirit of God manifests in justice. It manifests in equality. It manifests in light for everybody. So people should be able to benefit from the fact that there is a large population of people of faith in a country. That is why I always tell people, fine, now the West is not nominally religious.
Yeah.
But because it was built by people who actually believed in God, you find that institutionally, systemically, it is a system that cares for the weak. It is a system that cares for the hungry. So if today I go to the UK as a visitor and I collapse on the streets, there's no hospital that will ask me to ask my relations to open a card first before they treat me. They will treat me for free and save my life, even though they're not believers in God, because their system was built by people who believed in something more than we're just human beings here.
Fantastic. Now, tell us a bit more about our political history. I was particularly enthused about something you wrote recently. We were talking. You were talking about the concept of one Nigeria, which in reality does not exist when you look at the socio-political and economic landscapes, and it doesn't exist. So tell us a bit about our history. I love the story of the convergence when you wrote in the Wall and the Bridge, talking about how important and significant Nigeria is, because there are many people who believe let's just go our separate ways. So let's start with that point. What's so significant about Nigeria? We've heard the part that is our home and that is strong, and this is our responsibility. We will be asked here and hereafter what we did while we were here in Nigeria, or any other nation that you might be listening from. It's your responsibility. But tell us a bit about the uniqueness that is Nigeria, and history and all of that. Then we go to our political history.
You know, I always tell people that all over the world, and this is almost without exception, great rivers give birth to great nations. Whether it's the Yangtze in China, or the Tiber in Europe, or the Danube, or the Thames, all over the world, great rivers tend to give birth to great civilizations, the Nile in Egypt. Nigeria exists at that point where the longest river in West Africa meets its greatest tributary, and that's the Benue. And therefore, it is destined to be a great nation. It is a nation where so many interesting things intersect. For instance, Nigeria exists at that point where the South American continent broke away from the African continent. It also exists at that point where the African continent almost broke into three. So it exists at a geological crossroad. Nigeria also exists at a linguistic crossroad. Nigeria is a country where the four major language families of Africa meet. That's the Niger-Congo, the Nilo-Saharan, the Afro-Asiatic, and the Indo-European meet in Nigeria. Nigeria is also a country where all the historical African trade routes intersect. This is the Trans-Indian trade route, the Trans-Saharan trade route, and the Transatlantic trade route. So a high number of Africans that left Africa as slaves, many of them passed through Nigeria. That is why today the Nigerian DNA is one of the most prominent in the African American population. Wow. So Nigeria is of great cultural and symbolic value to the African diaspora because of where we are. So we sit at a crossroad, at an intersection, both linguistically, hydrologically in terms of rivers, geologically in terms of trade. And we know in all our spiritual belief systems, even within the Christian belief system, that wherever you have an intersection, we believe that there is greater power hovering over that place. In modern developmental discourse, it's called diversity, or a melting pot. Now, wherever you have a melting pot, you tend to have higher expressions of ingenuity and innovation in that space. True. It's one of the reasons why Nigerians are so naturally innovative, because we exist at a crossroad. We are also the only country in the world where Christianity and Islam, the two great monotheistic faiths of this world, meet as demographic equals. There's no other country. In other countries, either Christianity is the majority or Islam is the majority. Nigeria is the only place where it's 50-50. So it's a very interesting intersection on the global map. And that is the root of our innovativeness. That is the root of our unique creativity as Nigerians. It springs from where we exist. So these things are unique about us. These things are things that we should tap and exploit on the global stage because they make you stand out. And there's nothing like something that makes you stand out to give you a competitive advantage in any market. That's why people spend so much in developing a brand name.
Sure.
Because once you have a name that stands out, you already have an edge over your competitor. So Nigeria is not the type of country that if we know what we're doing, we're not the type of country that if you say I'm from Nigeria, they'll say, where? No, we're not that type of country. We're also the most populous black nation on the face of the earth. It is like being the firstborn in a family. Look, it does not matter if you are a drunk. It does not matter if you are the firstborn.
Yeah.
You always have a seat at the table. Your younger ones may not like it, but that's how it is. Nigeria is like the firstborn in the black community because we are the most populous black nation. So there are certain topics that you're discussing that Nigeria must be at that table.
So it is what you're saying essentially, because of this enormity of providence and divine benevolence, so to speak, we owe it as a responsibility, which is kind of what I was trying to explain when I said, I don't know how I would go to, for example, relocate to the UK or to the US and stand on that soil and say, okay, UK, I am reward, I'm fleeing from Nigeria. I was given this responsibility to do my best here. Paul said something in scripture. He said, you've not yet resisted sin to the shedding of blood. Now, as believers, we are not violent people. We're not saying go out and harm people, but we're saying, have you bled? Have you resisted evil in this land to that degree that you were willing to die to see good done? If we haven't, then our faith is false. We need to rise to that place, considering everywhere, like you said, where you have great rivers, you see great nations born, India, UK, all across the world. This is consistent. Why should our story be any different? Why should we be the butt in the line of things? Why should we be the odd one out, the excuse for that matter? And this is what we've been talking about. So in a few hours from now, we go to the polls to vote for our next leader. And I don't understand this thinking, and I don't know if you can elaborate more on it, where people believe, you ask a person, I'm voting this presidential candidate, this is my presidential candidate, and yes, like we've said, we're still fighting tribal war, so it's somewhere in the mind and we need to get rid of it. But we look at people who we will not allow manage our small businesses. If I own a kiosk, I will not allow some of the people running manage that kiosk. But yet we want them to manage the greatest nation in the world, the most complex job ever. We believe that some of the people who we believe are not as competent as they should be, considering where the world is at today. Like we said earlier on, the world is talking seeding civilization, colonies in outer space, artificial intelligence, and we are still talking support from development countries. We're still begging for aid. We're still talking about developing roads as our presidential manifesto in 2023. Nobody's talking about building nations. What would you have to say to Nigerians who want to vote for a candidate who clearly is not competent to run their lives, but yet they want that person to run the country and somehow believe it's going to be magically beautiful for them?
I will not. I believe that people who have been habitually and consistently voting for sub-optimal candidates,
Yeah.
I believe that they are beyond redemption.
Wow.
But luckily, they are also a minority. Buhari won election with 15 million votes in a country of 200 million people.
Yeah.
The total number of people that voted in that election was about 36 million, and there were over 80 million registered voters. So you have 40, 50 million Nigerians who, by not voting, are telling you that the political system has nothing for us. Those are the Nigerians I'm interested in, because those ones, there is hope. They are the reason why I still believe in Nigeria. That there are up to 40, 50 million people in this country who look at the political system as it is and they don't recognize themselves. These people do not represent me. They don't represent my values. They don't represent my thinking. They don't represent my character. They don't represent my personality. Those are the Nigerians that give us hope. And it is to them that one needs to address, because they are Nigerians who have hope but no faith. It is faith that moves you to action. So you have a lot of Nigerians who have no faith, and so they don't act. They have abandoned the space to others. And what I'm trying to say is that the contest is not over. The prize can still be won. You need to engage. You don't have to engage politically, but you need to engage in every way that you can. Whatever gifting, whatever skill, whatever talent, whatever space that you find yourself in, you need to engage as a Nigerian with your own values and your own perspective.
So, DK, I'd like you to talk to us about the political eras in Nigeria, the presidential election, the Zik era, the colonial era, the pre-colonial, the post-colonial era, the Shagari era, and everything, how it has led to this particular point that we are in history.
You know, Nigeria has a very interesting history. We're very interesting people. And I always remind people that at the time the British left, became independent, there were just about, I think about 3 or 4 higher education institutions in Nigeria.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them offered an applied science course. The British were not interested in educating us to achieve our full potential. They were only interested in educating us to be clerks and secretaries and teachers of educational prowess you see in Nigeria today is solely the result of the intentional investment of Nigerians in themselves. It's a reflection of the determination that our founding fathers had that we would be a great people. And so they set about very intentionally educating the people of Nigeria and arming them with the skills they needed to become what they would be in future. It was a foundation that was laid for us by that generation of Ahmadu Bello and Zeke and Awu and Tafawa Balewa. It was an investment they made in us that we would one day become what we're supposed to be. The fact that you even have people like me talking about one Nigeria, it is because people like Gowon invested in unity schools, created unity schools, created the NYSC, so that the NYSC could entity. These were investments that were made by those that came before us in hope. I always tell people that a country is not built on the everyday actions or behavior of the founding fathers. America is not built on how Thomas Jefferson behaved. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner who owned slaves. A country is built on the ideals of its founding fathers. What were they looking at? What was their vision? They were imperfect. They fought. They were petty. But that's not what you build your country on. You build it on their ideals. What were their ideals? That's the vision they leave to you. It's like a parent. I'm imperfect. I have children, but I want my children to be better than me. So what I try and give my children is not where I am. I try and give them my vision and equip them to go towards that vision. Forget what I'm doing. I'm equipping you to be better than me and move towards that vision. That was what our founding fathers did for us. That was the vision they tried to give us. That's why Zeke said that he's looking for a country where all Nigerians are equal before the law and justice is done without fear or favor. Discrimination is not practiced on account of race or tribe or creed or station in life. where all Nigerians are free to enjoy citizenship rights and privileges anywhere in Nigeria without fear of discrimination. That was the vision. And they didn't achieve that vision, but equipped us with the education, with the opportunity to mingle with each other so that we can achieve that vision. So that first independence generation, their own task was independence, to get us an independent nation, and they achieved it. They fought the British and they gave us a nation. Then you had a generation that came whose task was to overthrow the military rule that intervened in Nigeria's evolution and restored democratic rule. And that generation achieved it. Now, what is the task of this present generation? It is to institutionalize good governance, a functional state, a state that truly serves the people, a state that creates that condition Zeke was talking about, where all Nigerians, regardless of tribe and tongue, are free to enjoy citizenship rights and privileges anywhere in Nigeria without fear. It is our task to put in place a state, a government that is dedicated to that. And that is why this generation, more than any other generation, must begin to think differently when it comes to the issue of leadership selection. This is a generation where we have the capacity to put aside tribalism and religious bigotry when it comes to selecting leaders. Because it is only when we begin to select leaders on the basis of competence, that is when we can produce the state that is a reflection of the vision and ideals of our founding fathers.
How do we go from selecting leaders that feel emotionally convenient for us to selecting leaders for us at the moment, to selecting leaders who are consistent with the future we hope to walk into? How do we get there?
People who select leaders that are less than capable do it out of narrow self-interest and hopelessness. They actually don't believe in Nigeria. Those who select incompetent leaders don't believe in Nigeria. They believe Nigeria is gone. So they're just trying to, let me just take care of myself because this country is gone anyway. That's the attitude of those who intentionally select subpar leaders. They're only thinking of themselves. Which is why I always preach patriotism. It is only people that actually believe in Nigeria that can even engage with selecting on the basis of competence. Because to select on the basis of competence, you must have what I call enlightened self-interest. You must come to the point where you realize that if it is good for everybody, ultimately it is good for me. That's where we need to get to. So first of all, you have to believe that this country has a future before you can start talking about the capacity to select leaders on the basis of competence. And then secondly, think well. In the end, when you select this guy that is supposed to then give you the contract that will make you a millionaire or a billionaire, those billions and millions that he will give you in his 4 or 8 years in office will not save you 15 years from now when your child is on the road from Abuja to Kaduna and is kidnapped by bandits. That you will have forgotten that contract. That contract will not save you. It will not save you 25 years from now when you have an emergency, you have a stroke in your house and you are gasping for breath and people are looking for ambulance that has oxygen to come and save you. Simply because when you had the opportunity, you chose to empower your tribesperson. You were more interested that somebody from your village is Minister of Defense rather than a competent person that can give us an efficient security system that will outlast him in office. Because that is what you're going to need when you become old and frail, and you will become old and frail one day and be dependent on a functional public service system. That's the advantage they have abroad. A prime minister can retire in peace and go to his village. And the day he needs it, Mandela died in a hospital a few kilometers from his house. In dignity. He didn't have the indignity of being packaged and flown all over the whole world looking for where to treat him. And that will be your fate. It will be the fate of everybody who intentionally selects a subpar leader. One day you will die in a foreign country. or you will die on your way to a foreign country, or you will die begging somebody to give you money to travel to a foreign country so you can treat yourself. You will be subjected to that indignity. And that is a fate you can avoid simply by putting a leader in place who will create a system that works for everybody and will outlast him.
All right, 2 more questions and we're done. 1, what would you have to say to people who they have faith to believe that God can make their life work? Because working and doing business in Nigeria, it's essentially going against the tide on a daily basis. A single policy of government can turn your business upside down. The aggressive nature of the climb in many ways, it's not, you have to really believe in yourself and go against the grain to be able to achieve a lot of the things that we do, whether it's in sports or business and any area. But we have enough, many of us have enough faith to believe that God is going to do this in our lives and for us. But we don't extend that same faith to a capable presidential candidate who we know has the capacity to deliver the future that we desire. But somehow we believe it is hopeless. Meanwhile, on a daily basis, we are living against those odds every day, beating those same odds every day. I know, is this an issue of fear we're dealing with? Is this an issue of disappointment? Is this an issue of just being callous? So I want you to talk to this category of people.
I believe it is an issue of us believing that the political and civic space is a different space where our spiritual principles don't apply. I think we have created a division, a wall between our normal lives and politics. And when it comes to politics, the laws of God don't apply when it comes to politics.
And we're powerless there.
And we're powerless. And it is something I've become very conscious of, because even in ordinary things, the same Christian that believes that everybody is a child of God, once they come into the civic space, they'll say these Fulani people are different, these Igbo people are different. All of a sudden that everybody is a child of God does not translate to the civic space, does not have implications for the civic space. So we have built a wall between our faith, our values in non-civic context and that in the political context. So the same Nigerian that believes that, look, anyhow, God will bless my hustle. You know, that anyhow shall go make from nothing I can become something. That same Nigerian has problems believing that somebody can come from outside of the political system without a godfather, without a godmother, without anything, without money, and make it. So the faith that we have that we can make millions, we can pull billions out of the air, like a Nigerian puts us anywhere, we can make money out of it. We don't believe that we can crack the political system. That somebody can come and without doubling, without passing through, without using money, can get to the top.
Wow. So I'd like to just talk to all of us in Nigeria and those of us from other countries watching in from around the world. This is a very serious matter. It is a matter of unbelief. You've lost faith, you've lost hope, you've lost confidence in yourself, in your capacity, and more importantly, in the ability of God to intervene in this space. And so we're not engaging as we should. We treat it with levity, we take the most convenient one, we say things like, well, let's be logical, but you're not logical with your own life when you need things. You push, you pray, you need. But when it comes to the most important election in Nigerians' history, you somehow want to be logical, you somehow want to go without faith and hope and confidence, you somehow want to be faithless. We cannot afford to be this way in this election. We have to go out, we have to believe, we have to pray, we have to vote for the candidate who best represents God's plan and our interest, an interest of a civil, working Nigeria that works for everybody. It is what we owe. It is not a matter of choice, it's a matter of responsibility. We must vote, we must pray, we must persuade. These days, when I hear political conversations, I just don't walk away. I wait to see if I can interject and bring some level of reason. Perhaps, just perhaps, I might evangelize a soul to believing again that they can make things right. I don't care how many people say it's impossible, how many people say it's impossible. I care only that I believe, and to him that believes, all things are possible. If it doesn't work, when I get to heaven, God will have to explain. But He said it, He's written it. Let us believe Him and let us take action consistent with what we believe. So I'd just like you to look at our audience directly in the camera and talk with them for the next few minutes also.
So, remember your love for your country. This is the only country in the world where you come from. It's like you can never have a second mother or another father. You can't choose your parents. This is your country, and this is the country that gave you birth. And you must reconnect with your love for your country, because it is only love that can build a country. It is only when we are motivated by love and we're acting in love for a nation that we can lift it up. Anger, frustration, hate cannot build. It is love that nurtures. It is love that builds. And you need to reconnect with that love for this country, with your love for its weather. It's a blessing to be in a country where the sun shines every day of the year. It's a blessing to be in a country where the music is so tantalizing and beautiful. It's a blessing to be in a country where you can sow gari with granuts and porridge beans and fried fish. Don't take these things for granted. Have pride in your country as a Nigerian. There are so many wonderful things that we have done. South Africa would not be South Africa today if Nigeria did not stand behind it. It was Nigerian soldiers that are responsible for the peace that is in Sierra Leone and in Liberia today. Nigeria know they carry last. That is who we are. Have pride in your nation and know that you have a destiny. This country has a destiny. Everywhere in the world, the most populous nations are the most prosperous nations. If you go to North America, it's the US. If you go to Central America, it's Mexico. If you go to South America, it's Brazil. If you go to Europe, the population centers are Germany, UK, France. They're the most developed countries there. If you go to the Near East, the Middle East, countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey. If you go to the Near East, countries like India, Indonesia, Malaysia, these are the most populous countries, these are the most developed countries. If you go to the Far East, it's China, it's Japan. Africa will not be different. If you come to Africa, it is countries like Nigeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, Tanzania, South Africa. Our case will not be different. Here too, the most populous countries will be the most influential and the most prosperous countries in the days that are coming. Believe that that is your future and fight for it. This country belongs to you. It does not belong to anybody else. It belongs to you. And if you're a person of faith, you can shape it so that it resembles you. As it is today, our government no resemble us. It's like a beautiful, coming in, seeing a beautiful woman walk into a room, and beside her is one old man. In your mind, you go wonder how these two people take hook up. What's in the happen? That's how it is. When people look at us Nigerians, creative, talented, innovative, and they look at our state, slow, corrupt, still talking about roads in the 21st century, when people are talking about going to the moon. Our state, our government does not resemble us. And do you know why? It's because most of us don't choose that state. We have abandoned the arena to a minority who are only selecting based on self-interest. The day we begin to select leaders that look like us, that are innovative like us, that are creative like us, that hustle like us, that party and play and empath and accommodate like us, that's the day our country will take off. And the day Nigeria takes off, the world will hear about it. Trust me. Thank you.
This is Encounter Jesus Television,